This episode of The Profit Express is brought to you by Corbett Public Relations, promoting and protecting business and brands for over 30 years. So please visit my good friends at CorbettPR.com. That's CorbettPR.com. Well, hello and welcome to The Profit Express. I am Tim Healy, and I'm inviting you to join me each and every week so together we can win the battle for business. That's right. And don't forget to follow me and the show on Instagram at The Profit Express, at The Profit Express page on Facebook, and also on Twitter at Profit_Express. So welcome aboard. Thanks for sharing some of your time with me today. Now, my topic for today is risk. And I want to talk to you as the CEO, as the startup, as the entrepreneur, as the C-level executive. And what is your relationship with risk? I mean, let's face it, we encounter risk big and small each and every day. But I really believe deep down that it's our abilities to how we manage the risk, how we identify the opportunity and the risk that lies just in front of it, and also fear. How do we deal with our fear as it relates to the risk that we take as business owners? And that relationship, I think, is an intriguing one, and I think it has a big say as to just how successful or not we are in business and, of course, in life. Now, to tackle the topic with me, I really think I have been able to have a guest on today who has one of, in my opinion, I think you'll agree, one of the most unique stories and perspectives regarding risk. She entered the world of private poker games at the age of 23 as a complete novice. And soon thereafter, she ended up operating her own private poker game, which was one of the biggest in the world, which attracted billionaires, Hollywood elite like Ben Affleck, Tobey Maguire, Leonardo DiCaprio, and even athletes like A-Rod. And as we go through the story, how she has processed risk caught my attention. And you will no doubt know who she is, of course, by her Oscar-nominated film, Molly's Game, and the same titled book, Molly's Game, best-selling book. Listen, before I have her on, if you haven't seen the movie, see the movie now, today. If you haven't read the book, go buy the book today, and then while you're at it, buy a copy for a friend and give it as a gift. As in my opinion, as good as the movie was, I thought the book was just a tremendous read. So to have Molly Bloom on for today's show to talk to you about risk and how you manage that relationship and how it impacts your success, listen, you're in for a real treat. So it is a pleasure to welcome aboard The Profit Express, Molly Bloom. How are you today?
Hi, Tim. I'm so well. How are you?
I'm doing really, really, really great. Fantastic. As you can tell, I'm very excited to have you on.
Well, I'm very excited to be on.
Thank you. Because your story is so unique, and you know that, and we're going to certainly be exploring that today. And so when I'm preparing for today's show, I'm like, man, where do I begin? What question is the first question to ask? There is no right or wrong first question. So let me jump into it this way. There were a couple of men in particular who had a big impact on your life. The first one I want to ask you about is when you moved to LA, shortly after your skiing career had ended, and you were an Olympic hopeful skier. You moved to LA and you get a job as an assistant for a gentleman named Reardon, who was a real estate developer. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just a normal job. He was tyrannical. He berated you several times a day. And shortly into your relationship with him, he invited you to his private poker game. And he says, listen, I need you to serve drinks. So here's the question. What opportunity did you see with that game that gave you the strength and the courage and the tenacity to deal with his horrible behavior?
You broke up for 1 second. Let me just make sure I understand the question.
Sure.
Did you ask why I stayed in this situation, what I was looking to gain, or where I saw the upside?
Yeah. What opportunity did you see that, encouraged you to stay with somebody who was really so horrible?
Yeah, sure. So I came from a very rule oriented world, right? So you did this thing where you got good grades, you applied to some sort of graduate school, you worked hard in athletics, you followed the rules. This is what your life looks like. When I was sort of forced to retire from my big dream, which was mogul skiing, I think I was just kind of primed for a rebellion and really open to some unconventional, experiences.
Right.
And what I saw working for Reardon and what I was learning was sort of like the hustler's manifesto. These people that didn't take no for an answer. If they didn't know something, they figured it out. That I was listening to the language of deals. This was a brand new world to me, and I was fascinated by it for a lot of reasons. And so, I would say the answer is I was learning so much in a world that I'd had zero exposure to.
So it's kind of like a whirlwind, coming from that rural background, and you get dropped into this card game where you see the names like, Tobey Maguire and Ben Affleck, et cetera. Wow, it's got to blow your hair back.
It sure did. And then, when the game started, then it was a whole different level of a light bulb that went off, because, we talk a lot about the celebrities, the A-list celebrities that were in the game, but the fascinating people to me were the politicians, were the head of the investment banks, head of movie studios,
Right.
tech superstars. And this game was populated by all of those people, household names. And so I got to be a fly on the wall and listen and learn, and also ultimately, and I saw this, have access to this insane network just sort of by a fluke. And so after the poker game started, then I was really in. Then I was like, I'm not going anywhere.
But I guess as your upbringing, I know your dad was tough on you. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But you were smart enough. You entered the world as a novice. You don't know poker. You're Googling, what's a tilt, what's the flop, all those terms, right? I don't know poker either. Mm-hmm. And is it true? Thanks. Yeah, I can throw around some words. So he invites you. You bring a cheese platter from a local supermarket.
Gelson's. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And were you actually Googling music that gamblers like to listen to?
Yeah. I mean, I made the most embarrassing playlist of all time. I did not get creative. It was like The Gambler and Night Moves and just every cliche gambling song you can imagine.
All right. Hey, listen, you had to start somewhere.
By the way, I went over pretty well, to be honest.
Well, okay. So the first man in your life, in the first relationship with Reardon, was obviously a pivotal one. Then I also want to now talk about your dad. The movie did not portray him well. I know your relationship, like with most people, with your parents has evolved. Okay. What did your father teach you? How did he teach you that gave you the skills at 23? Because what blows my mind about your story at 20, as I'm reading this as an adult, I'm 50, and I'm like, how does she do this, right? So you're novice, you're 23, you're thrust into this world. So the question is, how did your dad prepare you? What did he teach you to embrace this and to create your success in this world with this opportunity?
Yeah, I think he kind of taught me to be counterphobic, meaning like if you see a situation and it looks hard and it looks scary and it looks like uncomfortable, walk towards it. I mean, that was truly what we learned as young kids is that fear and discomfort are not reasons to not walk through something. And then that was further underscored by my decision to be a professional mogul skier after having my back reconstructed. But, it was these early life experiences in which in my family, we were not allowed to be we were allowed to be afraid, but we were not allowed to not do it because we were afraid. I mean, there would have been like consequences. My dad was very big on teaching us to move through fear. He was also very big on teaching us what I guess he called constructive suffering, which is essentially discipline. Being uncomfortable and doing it anyway. And I'd say that's a good start for the reasons that I looked at this poker game and said, I want to own that. I want to be the bank for that. And let's go.
Wow. Well, yeah, your brother's also very accomplished in their own right. So very talented family, very competitive family. So I guess maybe your dad wouldn't be a fan of participation trophies as we have today.
No, we would not. No.
I just had to ask. So now you're in the game. You're doing a really good job with it. You're getting tipped. You're making some very nice money. And, Reardon is a guy who's, as I saw in the movie, kind of a troubled guy, has issues. And he fires you from the game. Mm-hmm. He fires you from the game. And you were drawn in. You were successful. You were really, really thirsty for this. You had to make a decision to go against him. Mm-hmm. Talk about risk. So you saw what was available to you. What was your strategy going against him with, the billionaires and the players, et cetera?
Yeah, the strategy had sort of already been laid out. Not necessarily recognizing that I was going to have to stage a coup against Reardon. But my strategy, and it's a good place, I think, to start is to do it, to authentically want to do a really good job for people. Mm-hmm. To show up for them, to spend your time thinking about not just how you can collect the check, but how you can really add value, and sort of cultivate real meaningful relationships that are trust-based and people believe you. And that's what I had done for 9 months. I'd gone above and beyond for people. I had authentically cared about their experience. I spent a lot of time and resources trying to figure out how I could upgrade the experience, doing favors for people outside of the game, sort of trying to make myself an integral part of people's lives and of this game and establish trust, and integrity, honesty, to be a really straightforward, transparent, honest person. And so when it was time, when ultimately my hand was forced, which I'm grateful for. I was really sick of working under anyone for that matter. But it was terrifying. I mean, Reardon's part of the Billionaire Boys Club. This is his game that he started.
Right.
I'm a 24-year-old kid from Loveland, Colorado, with no experience in the world other than in sports and college. And so to stage this whole game, and also I was terrified of Reardon because it's funny, we're friends now because people evolve and grow,
Right.
And
there's hope for all of us, right?
But back then, man, he was out of his mind. And so, when I staged my own game and I invited everyone except for him, and I had put all these sort of things into play that I thought would create this memorable experience that would convince people to overcome their bias towards a 23-year-old girl who doesn't know what she's doing, and play in my games. But everyone showed up, and I honestly, Tim, I think they showed up mainly because I cared, and I showed up for people, and I was a trustworthy person. And then the next day, the unbelievable happened. I get this call, the game, everyone shows up. The game is amazing. I've created this, you walk in and you feel like James Bond. I've increased the stakes. So
right.
There's all this stuff, and the game went amazingly well. And then Reardon calls me the next morning at 5 a.m. And I'm like, oh my God. And he's like, get over here. and I went over to his house, and I honestly was like worried for my life.
And you're 24 at this time.
I'm 24.
Okay.
And he walks in the room and he's like glaring at me, and then he's like, "I'm proud of you." It's like graduation day,
Wow.
You came to us as this naive little, rule following do-gooder.
Yeah.
And
So look, all right. I have to ask you because there's the book, which is a great read. Again, it's Molly's Game, of course, and it's turned into the movie, Oscar-nominated movie. How accurate was the portrayal of Reardon? Because he was vicious to you.
he was vicious. He was out of his mind.
That's how I saw it. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it was
Uh,
accurate.
but
Okay.
listen, he's in his 20s.
Okay.
Too
Yeah.
much money, too much partying, like the whole nine. And then, you know, underneath it all, I rarely think it's black or white. I
Right. Right.
rarely think it's good versus evil. I think it's a process. And even Reardon turned into a really decent human being.
I think you rubbed off on him after
I
a
don't know
while,
about
perhaps.
that.
So one thing that while you were novice to poker, one thing that you were astute with, and perhaps with your father, he was a psychiatrist, psychologist,
Psychologist, yeah.
psychologist. Okay,
Mhm.
I think you had a very astute understanding of human nature, and you knew what these guys wanted. And as you said earlier, the detail and the atmosphere and the experience that you created was phenomenal. Um, so many of the things that you talk about, you're building a brand. And you
Mhm.
really looked at it as a business, not just some
Mhm.
seedy card game in a dark basement
Right.
somewhere. But like you said, it was a setting of a James Bond movie in Monte Carlo or something like that. Um, so that helped you be, I think you're going to be, irreplaceable, invaluable to create that connection. So now my question is, which relates to so many, of the business owners and entrepreneurs listening. You were phenomenal at networking.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that. A, why was it so important to the game? And then, but how did you do it?
Um, yeah, so I mean, first and foremost, before networking, I knew I needed to create a really stellar product.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then by chance, this wasn't my doing, but I recognized real quickly the value of it, um, to establish that important people are part of this brand. The celebrities,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then as soon as I had those two things, look, here's the product, here are people that validate the product, then I was pretty fearless and pretty creative. You know, I mean, I talk about when I went to when I lose the LA game, and I go to New York. New York is like might as well be Mars to me at that time,
They
and
really were two very different games, correct?
totally different games.
Right.
And uh, New York just seemed so serious, and there was already this really established game culture with game runners, and everybody kind of played where they played. So for me to infiltrate seemed it was really difficult. Plus, it was 2008, so because of the economy,
Right.
poker games had lost a huge percentage of their players, and so when I got to New York, I had a brand. People knew about Molly's Game, but now I had to figure out how to get out there. So, and I don't. It's not a traditional business where you can pursue traditional methods of marketing advertising. So I created a little army, and so I hired socialites that basically their job is to go out and party and have fun,
Mm-hmm.
and they come across and they know people with money. I incentivized the concierge at the high end hotels, the maitre d's at the nice restaurants, um, valets, anybody who has contact, casino hosts. I did deals with a ton of casino hosts. Um, just anybody who had contact with these people. Um, And, you know, what I mean by these people are high net worth individuals who are drawn
Right,
to
right, right.
hedonism.
Wait, did you say hedonism?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the clubs, you know, the travel,
Yeah.
anyway.
Right.
And so that was the net I cast, you know, and you know, every time if one sort of strategy didn't pan out, I would just go back to the drawing board and try to infiltrate a different type of demographic that I thought maybe could be helpful. And then I also reached out directly to some important people in the poker world that possibly,
Right.
you know, that had their own games
Hmm.
or whatever. And, you know, I just, you know, I was just relentless about trying to break into that business, that market.
Well, actually, as I was reading and as you just describing it, you did a great job. I don't know if you're even familiar with the term. It's an old sales term. You know, just getting a network of bird dogs out there for you. You know, really. I mean, at the casinos, the hosts, the waitresses, etc., which is invaluable. And listen, if people listening just, you know, take poker out of it, take the game out of it, apply your principles of experience and atmosphere and networking. I mean, that alone first of all, it's tremendous. But did you really approach it as a business more than a game?
I approached it as business. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was constantly thinking about big picture things, and you know, the problem with the game is it's not really scalable. So
Right.
as soon as I started to realize, but I always thought there would be a play somehow, that it could be scalable, because there was always talk about legalizing online poker and you know, all that talk. But yeah, so I always thought about it as a business, and not a game. And especially when I got to New York and I was having multiple games, sometimes a day, and I became the bank. You know, I started guaranteeing all these games, and then I was just buried in spreadsheets and definitely felt like a business.
Now, so you go from owning, operating to the bank is and guaranteeing the debt, because you had that conversation with an attorney to make sure that you were operating legally, not taking the rake as is defined. Did things really change when you started to become the bank?
Things changed a lot. I did quite well until I started getting sloppy and drinking too much and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I did quite well being the bank. It was a really good move, because something I had recognized by losing the game in LA is that no matter how much blood, sweat, tears, creativity, like, you put into this, I was still replaceable. And that's part of the reason I became the bank. The other part of the reason was because when I polled players in New York, when I asked them what the biggest problem with the, you know, with poker games and such, they were really clear that it was risk, the risk that you take, and generally a lot of times you get stiffed.
Right.
And so I was like, if I can solve that I can really disrupt New York City, and I can hopefully monopolize poker.
Wow. So, talk about risk. Oh my gosh. As I was reading the book, by the way, there were several times I'm like, all right, I tap out. I don't know how she's doing this. But
because I was 23, that's why.
It must be. Yeah. You're being kind. Thank you. Let's go back. You had a standoff with Spider-Man, and the relationship and how he's portrayed in the book and the movie was fascinating. It really was. I was kind of surprised somebody at his level would. I mean, the way he approached things, like, you know, charging money for the what was it, the shuffle deck machine, and I mean, just crazy stuff. So you have the standoff. He puts you in an insane position for $1,000 tip. You knew, or at least that's how I read it, that things were coming apart. What was in your mind? What's your next step? How did that whole interaction with Tobey Maguire go down?
Yeah, for a while he he had started to express that he wasn't happy with how much money I was making, even though by this time it was my game and a huge amount of the value, including a huge amount of the players, were brought by me. And by all means, Toby shouldn't really have been allowed to play in this game, because he was better than everybody, and he gave really very little action, which pissed everyone off constantly. But they all played with him, and because of probably the celebrity factor.
Sure.
And so he was kind of going down this road of, you're making too much money, maybe you should give me a piece, or maybe you should cap your tips. Now, the tips were the way that I made money.
Right.
I'm running this whole thing, I'm organizing this whole thing, I'm bringing players, I'm paying everyone out. Like it was tips because that's the way to do it legally, but really this was more like salary. And I said flat out, no, I'm not going to cap my salary, and I am not going to give you a piece of it either.
Right.
And, there had been this evolution of me. When I started, I was this like wide-eyed 23-year-old serving drinks. And by the end of, 5th, 6th year, I wasn't playing that role anymore, I had become an entrepreneur and quite a successful one. And so then it started this sort of like mental chess, where he was like kind of trying to test his dominance and all this stuff. And then it culminated this one evening with him coming to the, where I was sitting and saying, I want you to bark like a seal if you want my tip, God. I want you to get on the desk and bark like a seal. And I laughed it off, and I was like, you're the actor, you get on the desk and bark like a seal. That's not what I do. And I thought he would just chill out, but it lasted for a very uncomfortable 35 minutes. And everyone at the game, like at the table, had stopped playing. And it's a standoff where he's like, what, are you too rich now? You're not going to bark. Anyway, there was a 0% chance, no matter what the cost on the other side of that I was going to do this at this point.
Yeah.
This was about a lot more than a $1,000 chip. This was about dignity now.
Yeah, you couldn't do it no matter what. Yeah.
And I guess he thought I was going to cave in, and when I didn't, he became even more sort of resentful of me, and then he took the game. I'm still glad I didn't do it though, and I refrained from putting a lot of those types of stories in the book. The reason that I put this one in is because it was important to me that because we all have bosses or people that are more powerful than we are. And I wanted to make a really strong statement of like, dude, it's not worth your dignity, and you can say no and lose everything and still rebuild. And that was just it's important for me to put that in there for other women and also other young people who might come into these situations and feel like they have to comply to some bull crap,
Right.
I don't think you do.
So you're absolutely right. You played that hand, no pun intended, perfectly well. You couldn't have caved because then all the other players would have seen it as well. Yeah. Which, forget it.
Forget
it. In the book, you discuss how early on, I don't know if it was elementary school when you were a young girl, you kind of got lost in reading, and you read the stories of some, very powerful women. Joan of Arc being one. I know there were a number, and it was early on that you realized, I really want to make something of my life. I really want to achieve something. How important is exposing people to ideas like that as far as, and what I mean is, I just don't think people are spoken to about or think about their potential. Because there's a lot of steps through your life as you follow the story where you say, hey, scoliosis, repaired spine, it doesn't matter, I'm going for the Olympics, right? And you tied with your brother third on the podium, right? Was it Jeremy or I forget the name? Jeremy, right. Your father even wrote you off because of the surgery. So how important is mindset for people? And let's talk about it from a woman's perspective, because you were in a very male dominated world. I mean, obviously there's women in poker, but yours is very male dominated. What message do you have for women who, maybe they're graduating college, maybe they're entering the workforce, whatever it may be, they're not at that level yet, that they're lacking certain confidence? Because obviously you were never short on confidence.
Um, Maybe I was, but my desire to accomplish trumped any lack of confidence, you know. Here's what I would say. At a young age, I learned to get some elevation on the way that I thought and the way that I felt inside. Meaning that I learned that just because there was fear about doing something, or just because my brain was kind of shooting out this dialogue of like, you're never gonna do that, there's no shot, like you're a 23-year-old kid from Loveland, Colorado. I learned at some point to get some elevation over that thinking mind and the emotional mind, and make choices that were congruent with logic.
Now, if I can interject, I'm sorry. You're saying I
Yeah.
chose to get elevation over those ideas. What do you mean by that?
I mean, so there's the thinking mind, and then there's the kind of like seat of witness. So like how you can see your mind thinking, you can observe the thoughts.
Right.
You can get a little bit disconnected and look at the brain and go, oh, okay, this is fear, and this is
Okay.
irrational fear, and I'm going to observe that and then make a choice based in rationality. This
Okay.
ability to act differently than you feel.
Wow. Not easy to do.
Or to take contrary action. Yeah, it's not easy to do, but if you practice it all the time, then it becomes easier.
And that's going back to your dad having you at the top of some mountain somewhere, saying, quitting's not an option, no
Yeah.
matter how terrified.
Yeah, and if you look down a mogul run, which is basically like a bunch of gigantic bumps and then two more like even more gigantic that you're supposed to launch yourself off of and then land in more bumps and ski. If you look at the top of that, if you stand at the top of a mogul run, you're like, no way. But I had the really incredible experience of standing on the top of one of those runs saying, no way, and then learning with what practice and courage and consistency produced, which was standing on the top of that run and going, bring it on. And what a powerful lesson to learn young in life, because if we're constantly polling our brain to find out if this venture is going to make us feel comfortable or is going to be safe feeling, that's never the case, right? Like nothing risky or new or hard ever feels good in the beginning. It all feels bad. It feels scary. It feels like exposure and discomfort, and just learning how to move through that and learning how to kind of overcome those parts of your mind that want to keep you safe and alive, but want to keep your life small,
Well, so as you're describing this, it's kind of you've embraced the fact you've trained yourself to be comfortable being uncomfortable in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's a superpower to be able to have those thoughts, because we all do, unless you're maybe that guy that from Free Solo, he might not be afraid of anything. He might not have
Alex
fear.
Honnold, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you seen that movie?
I have. And
Oh
it blew my mind. And my husband's a neuroscientist, and I'm like, does that guy like have a different brain than we do? And then they said that they looked at his brain and there was way less activity in the amygdala, which is where fear is produced. So, that's the point. But like, like everybody has those thoughts. Everybody has the fear. Everybody's brain throws signals of discomfort when you're trying to do something big and brave and new. And that sort of ability to just maneuver through that, I think is kind of been the secret sauce in my life. But, then I also made some really stupid decisions.
Such as?
And, you know, taking, taking a rake in the poker games, because I was doing them legally. I was doing them all legally. And then I got in, I started to get sloppy and really, what started out as kind of like taking pills to stay up for the 24 hours that the game was going to last. And then taking something to go, it escalated. And I developed a real like substance abuse problem and started making super bad decisions and ended up, even though I knew the federal statutes, doing something that would violate the federal statute and then obviously getting in a lot of trouble.
So things were operating smoothly. You were on the right side of the law, and the involvement with the drugs and alcohol. That's the point. If you had to put a push pin into it, that's where it started to compromise your ability to vet players and risk, et cetera.
Yeah, I think who knows what which comes first, but
Right.
I started just kind of losing myself in all of this. I became addicted to the adrenaline and the more and the success and the money, and it was never enough. And that sort of became the truth with the drugs and the alcohol too. And yeah, it was a slippery slope.
But you've learned some very powerful lessons from recovery, though, no? That you're.
No question. No question.
What has going through it was a 12-step.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What made the most sense for you there that helped turn your life around?
Yeah, I guess it was someone saying to me, drugs and alcohol aren't your issue. The issue is you. The issue is the way that you think and the way you feel and the way you relate to the world. And you're always going to be searching for the external fix, whether it's money, relationships, drugs, alcohol. And that really clicked for me. I grew up in this very high achieving family. My brother's skill set presented super early. Jeremy was an athletic prodigy. He was number one in the world at 18. He went on to win 3 world champs and compete in 2 Olympics, and then also played in the NFL. My middle brother is a Harvard professor and cardiothoracic surgeon at Massachusetts General. And these two, yeah, that was my dinner table.
Oh my God. Wow. Okay.
And they were just who they were from the very beginning. And I didn't know what my skill set was yet. And, it turned out to be probably an entrepreneur, but so I'm trying to make it happen in school and I'm trying to make it happen in sports and it's not happening. And I feel like invisible in my family and I feel really like I need to do something in order to feel right.
Yeah.
I need a seat at this table and whatever it takes, which is why I chased poker after it got dangerous, after I got beat up by the mob, after, all these things went down and I couldn't leave. It was because this was the one thing that was making me feel like someone, or at least I thought it was,
So there's indictments in L.A. Bad Brad blew things up for you guys out there, and his Ponzi scheme, New York and the Russians with the healthcare fraud. So you have indictments, and then you get a visit by the Italian mob, not just one but 2 different mafia. If you do it right. I have to admit.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So they, a horrific encounter with, a member of the mafia because you decided not to get into partnership with them.
Yeah.
And so even despite all of that, you kept going.
I kept going.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, kind of to circle back, it was this mind-blowing revelation that none of these things I'd ever pursued, not making it to the Olympic qualifiers, not building this brand that was, making me super rich and super powerful, none of these things, even eventually a movie coming out about none of these things were going to make me well inside. They are not
Right.
the things that fulfill you. They can be great cherry on the top. I'm not saying that we shouldn't go big or aim high, but like
Absolutely. Yeah.
the way that I was and how just ruthlessly I was willing to throw myself to the wolves to try to make whatever I was making work. Like, it was this big moment in my life where I knew that I needed to do some real work on that, or I was always going to keep running into myself and never enjoying anything that I had put, my heart into.
So now, it's a story that has so many interesting angles to it, aspects rather. I should probably say aspects.
Angles is the lingo.
Angle, okay, yeah. So many interesting angles to the story. Again, Molly's Game is the best-selling book and the Oscar-nominated movie. So it all happens. Things start to unravel. The attack from the mafia, etc. The indictments, and it comes down to they have you. You're arrested. You're facing 10 years in prison. And they correct me if I'm wrong on the details. I'm trying to get the details correct. Basically, if you are an informant for us, give us what we're looking for, you'll get your money back because they seized your assets, millions of dollars in assets they seized, and no jail time if you're an informant. This to me is where your story is mind blowing. So you're faced with this, and what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, they tried to really make me a sweet deal, to give all the money back and keep me out of prison. But I would have to, this is the Southern District of New York, this prosecutorial office, and they were super interested in the politicians, the people on Wall Street, and the celebrities. They had no interest in my, cooperation with any kind of organized crime. It was the flashy people. And, they had followed the right instinct. I did know some of the things that these people were doing on the side. I didn't have any information like about an Epstein or a Weinstein. Man, I would have given those people up, no problem. They wouldn't have been able to stop me talking.
Right. That would have been an easy decision for you to make. Right. Yeah.
These were people that were doing what the equivalent of running a game of Texas Hold'em was.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Not harming society, in my opinion. And so, kind of like, no way, right? You're gonna. First of all, I'm in this position, and it's 100% my fault. Like, I did all of this. Nobody tricked me. There was no arm twisting. I made these choices, and here I am. I'm federally indicted. And now you're telling me that the way out is to turn around and step on people who were very loyal to me, who showed up and supported my game, who made me millions of dollars, and who I don't really think are doing anything that particularly wrong.
Yeah, but so, Molly, thankfully I've never been to prison. I hear it's not a pleasant place to be. You're faced with 10 years.
Yeah, well, I would have probably done less than 10.
Yeah, whatever it might have ended up being, 6 months.
I say that because, okay, look, let's be really honest. If I'm looking at life in prison, that's a different choice.
Right.
Maybe, right? But I'm looking at 5 or less, probably.
Okay.
They dropped one of the charges, which, by the way, no walk in the park. Total nightmare. No. And, I spoke to my attorney and I was like, well, isn't it like feds, federal prison, like country club? And he said, it's not the same for women, Molly. It's not a bunch of white collar, female criminals. These are dangerous people, scary people. And
sure.
Anyway, I I tend to have this like overconfidence in my ability to handle things. And my rationale was, um, I gotta stand up for the consequences of my actions. I have to do something that I can live with. And I have to be able to have a second chapter. And so I just decided, like, if I have to go to prison for a couple years, I'll figure it out. Like I'll get a law degree, or I'll do something that makes that time meaningful, or maybe I'll start an AA meeting in prison. Like I'll figure that out. I can think on my feet. That said, I don't know if that would have been the case.
Right.
But I'm just telling you how I came to this decision. And the other piece was like, I know the way I spend money. I'll blow through that money in no time. Especially now that I have to pay like all these lawyers and stuff. It's not going to last me that long.
Right.
So have it, and F you to your deal.
Right. So now it goes back. Your father growing up, one of the things that he said to you and your brothers was, whatever you do, own it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, put your name on it. And there's that one scene in the movie, which I thought was a great scene. It was a very emotional scene where you were named after your grandmother, I believe. And it's like, it's all I got at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, that was all I had left. That's for sure.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I needed to be able to live with myself and live with my choices. And because this kind of goes back to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm either going to make my life happen or I'm going to be my worst enemy,
Yeah.
And so I needed to believe in who I was.
So, I think you did a great job with that. Now, they take all the cash, you're in debt, all that.
Mm-hmm.
The sentencing, you get lucky.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So then you've got this one asset, the book. This is a hilarious story. This is now we're away from getting roughed up by the mob. Now we're to a lighter part of the story. So you have this book, and you're a tremendous sales professional, by the way. You're entrepreneur. I mean, you're a hustler, networker. I mean, and that's why I'm telling people, listen, great book. Get the book. Read the book. It's a must-read book. Honestly, the lessons from, just to forget the poker, just from the business perspective, are tremendous. So, you have this book that wasn't really selling all that well at the time.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, it was okay. And you go to shop it to Hollywood.
Right.
And so again, you're very analytical. You do your research. You're like, okay, I want this guy Aaron Sorkin, because whatever he touches turns to gold. I want him to do my movie. You're laughing now. It was so. If you're in Hollywood, it's a laughable request. Take us through that story, because I love it.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because when I got sentenced, I was like, okay, so I can. I'm not going to jail, but like I'm 35 years old, I'm millions of dollars in debt. My reputation's destroyed. My network is destroyed. The tabloids are telling this reductive tale. Like, I need a rebrand,
See, you go right back to the mindset, the business mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, all right, put your thinking cap on, put your entrepreneur cap on. What are there any brand assets that are still available to you? And I really landed on that it was the story. It was a unique story. And if I could learn how to monetize it, it could also serve as a massive rebrand, And so I write the book, and it doesn't sell that well. Like at all. And then I was like, okay, well, and I made some big mistakes. I expected publishing to take care. I should have been really actively involved in marketing. I wasn't. So anyway, so I go to Hollywood, and everybody's taking a meeting, like I'm getting meetings with everyone, and I'm in the rooms with people, and they're super passionate about it. And then nothing. Every time, over and over and over and over. So finally, I have a big meeting with the head of one of the biggest networks on television. And he said to me, look, you seem like a nice person, so I'm going to level with you. Okay. We all take this meeting because it's a great story and because it's Hollywood lore and we want to hear it. But no one's going to make this movie.
Gut punch.
Right? He's like, there's too many people that will make the phone call from DC to Wall Street to A-list that have played in these games that are not going to let this movie get made. And I said, I thanked him for his candor. And I remember sitting in my car and just like wanting to like break things, because I did everything to not implicate these people, and now they're trying to run interference on basically the one shot I had. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, I was like, no matter what, I'm making this happen. No matter what, because this is some injustice. And so I went back to the drawing table and I realized there is a short list of people in Hollywood, and they are the writers and some of the directors that are such a limited resource that can just turn out hit after hit. And they are so valuable that they don't have to play politics. That was my analysis. So at the top of that list for me was Aaron Sorkin. I think Aaron's brilliant. I love his writing. He's intelligent. He wasn't going to reach for the low-hanging fruit. He wasn't going to make this into the Wolfette of Wall Street or whatever it was. And he has great commercial instincts. And I was just like, I need a meeting with Aaron Sorkin. And like, of course, no one would give me that meeting because the only people that were taking it were not serious.
Right.
And finally, I just was relentless enough. And this attorney who became my entertainment attorney and a dear friend of mine, Ken Hertz, said, I can get it to Aaron. And so I get this meeting with Aaron,
Wow.
And
wow.
I tell him my story, and I'm like trying to be confident and not look as destroyed as I am in life. You know what I mean? Like trying to exude confidence, like I have it all together. And after I told him my story, it was hilarious. He was like, well, I'll tell you one thing. I've never met someone so down in their luck and so full of themselves.
that is an awesome quote. Awesome.
It's an awesome quote. It's all subterfuge, like it's all a put on, but apparently I pulled it off. So
wow.
Then Aaron Sorkin not only wrote it, but made it his directorial debut.
Yeah.
Really well, and somehow it worked, Tim. I don't know.
Oh no! Listen. I'm a fan of the book. How the movie? Were you pleased with it? I mean, might sound Oscar nominated. Might sound silly, but I mean that's your life on the big screen now.
Yeah. So I opted not to see the movie until the premiere. Everyone said,
really?
Producers and Aaron, and they said, you need to sit in a room and watch this movie by yourself. And I'm like, I'm not surviving that. I'm just going to have to go to the premiere. And so I'm sitting there in the theater thinking like, Molly, you're such a moron. Like, why did you get this movie? You're here with 2,000 people to watch this movie for the first time. And I just remember that first scene is so dynamic and so brilliant,
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that could happen in sports,
Yeah.
Like getting fourth at the Olympics, that whole scene. And
yeah.
I was just like, wow, this is a really good movie. And I'd worked really closely with Aaron for about 8 months, 5 days a week. And watching that movie, he had gotten so precise with the details.
Yeah.
Watching that movie was really like watching my life flash before my eyes for 2 hours and 12 minutes. And
what an emotional experience it must have been.
And I'm sitting there with my family who's seeing it for the first time. And, Aaron Sorkin and Mark Gordon and Ken Hertz and these people that have believed in this story and fought for it. And an audience of 2,000 people who are crying and laughing and cheering. And man, it was like, there's a lot to unpack. I got like a migraine. I went home and went to bed early. I was like, this is
okay, I'm done. We're good.
Yeah, I'm done. And by that time I'm sober, so I can't even have a drink.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't numb yourself. Right.
Too much stimulation. Need to go to bed.
Wow, wow. That was, I, man, you can sell. You can sell. You're good. You are real good.
Thank
That's an
you.
awesome story. Listen, there's so many more questions I'd like to ask. We just never you never have enough time. Um, I have one last one, and usually here the funny thing at the end of the book, you say, "Hey, I always get asked about if I had to do it over again, would I do it?" And you say, "I absolutely would." Right? And that's usually one of my questions, but I'll ask it a little bit differently. Not that you, because you've already said you wouldn't do it over, but if you take the same experience that you had, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, of course. Of
Is
course.
there anything? Is anything?
Yeah. What I would have done is, well, but then there probably wouldn't have been a movie. All right. Well, I don't know now because my answer was going to be I would have done um, what my original plan was, which is spend a couple years creating this insane network that people would die to have,
Right.
make, a couple $1 million, and then go do something real in the world, you know?
Cash in, call it quits, leave.
Yeah.
Okay.
Learn the lessons, get the information, build the network, save a couple $1 million, and then go to law school or business school or whatever it was,
Right. Right.
and start something that is scalable, is sustainable, is not going to result in 17 FBI agents waking you up in the middle of the night with semi-automatic weapons. Like, just be a little bit more of a rule follower. Because
You.
that was the cleanup job on that was
Yeah.
extensive, you know, was a decade, and everything that goes along with that.
And your relationship with your parents?
The best it's ever been,
I know your mom was rock solid throughout, according to the
rock
the
solid,
story. Yeah. Yeah.
rock
You,
solid, no
yeah.
wavering.
That's
My dad
awesome.
and I had trouble,
Yeah.
but we had trouble from the time I was little. I refused to listen to authority. That did not bode well for him. Um,
Or the
and
FBI. Yeah. Okay.
or the FBI, right? Yeah, I learned my lessons hard, I guess. Um, or the mob or whatever.
Right. Right.
Um, but I think at the end of the day, so that scene that happened in the movie, the scene that was on the park bench,
With you and your
the
dad. Yep.
answer, my question, it really happened. It happened in California. It didn't happen in New York, and the question and the answer were a bit different. But my question was, listen, I know I was hard, but why didn't you like me as much as you liked my brothers? Is it because they were more successful? Is it because you considered them more valuable human beings? And that was a question that had plagued me my whole life and driven me my whole
Wow.
life. And his answer was different than it was in the movie. His answer was, I've been a psychotherapist for 40 years. Um, I I know how hard the world is, and I think it's harder for women, and I wanted to make you tough. And in that moment, I understood my dad, in a way that I hadn't understood my dad. I made it all about me and my hurt ego and all that stuff. And my dad was in his 30s trying to raise a difficult kid in a difficult world. So
Wow.
that was the turning point for us.
Wow. Well, if his job was to make you a strong woman in a tough world, I think he absolutely that might have been his greatest accomplishment in life, quite frankly, if that was his goal.
Yeah, he might have taken it a little too far.
Well, yeah. Uh,
Or my interpretation was a little too far.
right, right. Listen, I want to thank you for sharing your time today. Awesome movie, fantastic book. People can follow you. What's the best way for people to follow you and your story and what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm on both Twitter and Instagram. I'm Molly Bloom. So I am Molly Bloom.
I am Molly Bloom. Um, if I can be so bold as ask one final question, I promise it's the last.
Yeah.
How do you want to be known?
Um, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I can tell you that what I would love to do in the world um, is make an impact, and I know that that's not an original idea, but it is true.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've had these crazy experiences, and I have, I've figured out how to reinvent myself from the ashes. And something that's really unexpected that came from all of this was this ability to impart this message of hope,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
not too late.
No,
If
never,
you
never
if
too
you're
late.
breathing, right, it's never too late. And to also sort of give women the power to make mistakes. Anyone the power, really, but
Mm-hmm.
women in particular are sort of expected to follow the rules and
Yeah.
not run underground gambling syndicates or whatever the case may be, right? And I am living proof that making mistakes is okay, and that you take responsibility, you learn the lesson, and then you get to have another chance. So and the various things I'm doing, writing the next book, developing a documentary, I have a startup. The focus for all of it um, is to make an impact and to share messages and experience and wisdom that I've gained from this crazy journey.
Well, I think you're doing a phenomenal job of it, and just even for myself, sharing, being able to read your story and have you on has been personally a great experience, and for the
For me
listeners.
too.
So,
For me too.
listen, thank you so much for being on board. And this is the Profit Express. Again, special thanks to Molly Bloom. Get the book, read it, buy it as a gift, give it to somebody else. Molly, thank you so much for being on board today.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
And this is the Profit Express. Don't forget to follow me and the show on Instagram at the Profit Express, Twitter at Profit_Express for latest updates and latest episodes launching every Wednesday. And until next week.